Okay, I think let's go ahead and get started. Uh, Thank you everybody for joining us and welcome to another Work It Wednesday. My name is Paula Houghton. I'm the Director of Special Projects at Foundations, Inc. We're the organization that's responsible for the Beyond School Hours National Education Conference. And these Work It Wednesday webinars are just our way of bringing you a little bit of Beyond School Hours at home. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Mary Curry from Mango Math. And Mary is full of great ideas on how to make math fun and engaging for kids. And today she's going to be focusing on addition and subtraction. We have more great topics for Work It Wednesdays coming up soon, including 2 more webinars from Mary that are going to be about multiplication and division and problem solving. So check out those and all our other ones at the link that I just posted in the chat. And you can follow us on social media. I'm also posting those links in the chat. All that business out of the way, Mary, why don't you take it away?
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate being here with all of you. To give you a little bit of background on myself, I am an educator. I have taught everything from kindergarten all through actually 9th grade. And I've worked regular education as well as special education. So I have a lot of background with working with kids. And I also have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. And my one little forte in life is making games. So I have spent a lot of time and energy creating games that get kids involved in mathematics and helps them understand mathematics. So with no further ado, I'll go on with my presentation. So I'm hoping to create math champions. That's kind of my goal, is to work with educators and help them become math champions. So that's going to be most of the focus here. So to start, let me get my slideshow going. And if you have any questions, put them in chat or ask them directly on my, unmute yourself and ask me. I'm happy to take any questions. So we're going to first start with a math quiz. And so I want you to think about mathematics, and I want you to think about this question. Some people are born better in math than others. Is that true or false? If you were thinking about it to yourself, do you think that's true or false? And that's actually false. There is no research, no brain development or anything that shows that people are born better in math than other people. So it really is on exposure to mathematics that make people better in mathematics. So know that all your kids come in with the complete ability to learn mathematics. And then the other one that I hear so often are Asian students are better in math than other students. Do you think that's true or false? So think about that one. And that also is false. Although we do see a lot of students of who are Asian that that you might see that are doing better in math, but it's a preconceived idea that they're better than other students. And it's one of those examples of when you put an effort into thinking something that happens. So we often think that kids who are of Asian descent are better in mathematics, and so they rise to that occasion. So if we think all kids can do well in math, we can actually rise them all up. And so think about that when you're working with your students as well. And then another question is, math fact mastery is the key to advancement. Do we need to have kids having mastery of their math facts in order for them to succeed in math? If you think of that one, and that is actually also false. What we need kids to actually have is that understanding of math sense and number sense. So how numbers work with each other, and that's what develops their higher level ability thinking. If we're just memorizing facts, rote memorization, it doesn't hold any real value. But if you can get kids to understand between numbers and number relationships, that's what's going to get them to be in advanced mathematics. And then you must be fast in math to excel in math. And this one also is false. Some of the best mathematicians in the world, from Einstein to Katherine Johnson, they all have spent a lot of time thinking about math to succeed in math. So it's actually thinking, mathematics is a thinking operation and not a fast operation. So we need to get kids off of this idea that they have to have everything down like this, and getting them to understand that we need them to stop and to think about numbers. So one of the things I often tell people when they're working with kids, don't answer the question. When you ask a question and the first person raises their hand, don't call on that person right away, because once that person answers the question, all other kids stop thinking. So we want to make sure that you spend a little time allowing those kids to think through the mathematics. And then the other one, I get this a lot, is it okay to tell students that you aren't a math person? And that one, I say, is also false. It's like telling a child that you don't like broccoli. I don't like broccoli. I hate the taste of broccoli. They're going to start thinking, oh, I don't really want to taste broccoli either. So if you put something down, the more likelihood a child is going to think badly of it as well. So if you sit there and tell people, oh, I'm not a math person, I was never a math person, I don't really care for math, and that type of things, it tells them to devalue mathematics. So you can tell kids that you have struggled with mathematics and that it takes time for you to process mathematics, that's all fine. But telling kids that you're not a math person and that math isn't a necessary skill is detrimental to the children. So encourage them about mathematics, but don't put your perception of mathematics and opinions of it towards them, because we want them to be able to succeed on their own merits. And then finally, math is different today than when we were in school. And this might be aging myself a little bit in this question, because some of you might have experienced math differently than I did. But this is actually, for me, and people of my generation, very true. I learned an algorithm. I had to follow those steps in that algorithm, and that's how I got an answer. I didn't have to actually understand mathematics at all. I just knew how to follow an algorithm and get an answer. But that didn't help me in the bigger perspective of what mathematics is. And in today's mathematics, we are really working hard in getting students to understand numbers and number systems so that they can advance in mathematics. All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. So attitude is everything. Attitude is everything. And I'm not talking about the children's attitude. I'm actually talking about your attitude. Earlier, I had said, you know, inflicting kids with your opinions. We want you to not feel like you have to be an Einstein and have the right answers. That's not actually the job of a teacher. The teacher isn't supposed to have right answers. The teacher is supposed to help a child think about how to get to an answer. So your job really is to be a cheerleader and encourage a child to start thinking to come up with answers. So I want you to go off the mind frame that you have to have the right answer to going to the mind frame that you are going to be a cheerleader encouraging kids on. Because I think what's one of the big reasons that a lot of people get nervous about math is that they think they have to have the answer. And I'm telling you, you just have to have to encourage kids. So math achievement and why it's so important is that it is the best indicator of academic success. So they have done studies in which they did kindergarten through middle or elementary school, and trying to determine what was the thing that helped kids succeed later in education. And they found that mathematics and how well they did mathematics determined how well they did in all other subject matters as they went through their grades. So we really want to encourage mathematics at a very young age and get kids comfortable in mathematics, because that's really what's going to help drive their scores in all other subject matters, including reading. They did a study with 32 states plus the District of Columbia on how to help kids in reading. And they found that the best way in all the things that they went through was their math scores. How well students did in mathematics determined how well they did in reading. So we really want to put an emphasis into mathematics. And the other is financial success. People who get into higher level mathematics in high school actually do better financially. So that makes a lot of sense, because the better you are with numbers, the better you can make decisions that are financial decisions, like what's the best loan to buy, what is the best products to buy, how to refinance, how to invest your money. All that is all numbers. And so if you have a better idea of money and math, you do better financially. So that brings me to a little secret about myself. I'm actually dyslexic. I struggled in math all through my elementary, high school, junior high, and high school years because I'm dyslexic. So I had to learn how to cope with my dyslexia and try to achieve things. And I actually wasn't tested for dyslexia until I was in my graduate, in my master's program. And when my professor finally looked at me and said, "Did anyone tell you you have dyslexia?" And I was like, "Oh, no." But that answered so many questions because I struggled in reading and I struggled in mathematics. So this little slide kind of shows you what people with dyslexia go through. And that's about 5 to 10% of the population. And within, and this is the most common learning disability there is out there. So they will have a lot of these, not all of them, but they will have a lot of these symptoms like sequencing, remembering numbers. I can't remember phone numbers or numbers to save my life. I just moved recently and I don't even remember my last address. And so it's just the ability to hold on to those type of things is very difficult for me. Dates, I do well with spatial reasoning, but not so much with spelling and reading and things like that. There's also one that's focused more on mathematics, and this deals with more of 3 to 6% of the population. And so the reason I'm pointing this out is that all kids come with different abilities in mathematics, and not abilities in mathematics, but come with different issues that we have to overcome with them. So some kids will struggle with math, but that doesn't mean they can't learn it. It didn't mean it for me. It doesn't mean it for them. They can still learn mathematics. And I'm going to show you ways that we can do that. So here's one activity I kind of want you to do. I want you to close your eyes, and I want everybody to close their eyes. And I want you to picture in your mind a red star. So if you close your eyes and just picture a red star in your mind. Now, oh, you can open your eyes now. Now know that a lot of people see that red star in different ways. You can have it as one where you see nothing. You can see a fine tracing of it. You can see a better outline of it. And you can, to all the way point that you can actually see a red star. For me, I see nothing. I can't picture a red star. I can trace out a star in my mind. I can think, okay, it's going to have these points, it's going to have these attributes, but I can't picture a red star. I can't picture a number in my mind. So when somebody says, add these numbers up, mentally add these numbers up, I can't hold a 3 in my head to add a 6 onto it. So know that some kids can do that and other kids cannot. So having an understanding of brain development is important to understand that not all kids can picture a number and be able to do mental mathematics in their head easily. There's ways to help them with that, and I'm going to show you those, but just have that idea in your head that there are people like myself that have learning problems that we have to have different strategies in order to learn to add and subtract numbers. So brain development is, we have to understand that your brain is movable. Like you can, it has plasticity, that meaning it can expand and it can grow and it can make lines through it and make connections. And that's kind of what we want to do with kids. So strategies and teaching a child a strategy if they have difficulty in mastering their numbers is something they can go back to and rely on. So it's easier for me to know a certain strategy to add 2 numbers together than to have in my head how to add those. So if I see a 3 plus a 5, I have a strategy to get to that answer. And I can use that strategy with many other numbers, not just the 3 and the 5. I can do it with the 2 and a 4, but it's a strategy I can do to get to an answer. So that's easier for me to to develop a pathway. So if you think of your brain as a forest and there's all these trees, what we're trying to do is get a really distinct pathway between one connection and another connection. So when we're working with kids, giving them the strategy is what starts to make that path a really defined path, and not just a little rabbit through a forest path, but a really defined, trail that we can follow. And repetition helps master that. So we want to teach a strategy, and we want to do repetition on that strategy, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit. So to be a math hero, and we need you all to be math heroes, so we're going out there promoting mathematics, is very simple. When someone says the word math to you, we want you to react in a positive way. So a math hero is going to react positively. Math, we're going to do math? Great, let's get on it. This is great. I'm being very positive about mathematics. That's what makes a math hero. And if faced with a math problem and looking at how you approach it, is going to be how the kids approach it. Now, if you approach it as curious, let's come up with the answer to this problem, let's figure it out, is what a math hero does. So you don't have to have the answer, but you could be curious about how you can get to the answer. And there's actually science out there that even if you tell them, even if you guys together come up with a wrong answer, that you are actually still developing your brain and still making connections, even if you come up with the wrong answer. And if a child asks to help in homework, what do? A math person is going to ask questions of that child to help them clarify their thinking. So it's not they come to you with a question like, what is the answer to this? It's not giving them the answer. It's asking them questions to help them get to an answer. So to be this math champion, we must accept that mistakes are actually good. There's a very famous quote by Michael Jordan that he made so many mistakes, and that's how he became the best basketball player there was, is through all the mistakes he's made. So we have to understand that making mistakes is how you learn. So mistakes are good, because if you have the answer, you didn't learn anything. So we have to make sure that in figuring out the answer, mistakes are okay. And understanding that speed isn't important. We don't need kids to be reciting their facts like this. We need them to think about how they get to the answer, and it might take them a couple steps. It might take them a strategy to get there, but they're going to get there. And so speed isn't important. And then we want to make sure that it's engaging. If we make mathematics fun for them, they're going to see it as a positive, and they're going to want to continue with it throughout their lives, but in particular throughout their high school education. And then using manipulatives. Manipulatives are very important, especially for someone like me that struggles with getting a math idea in my head, that if I see manipulatives and I can relate that to a mathematic issue, I can start to make those connections. So let's get into some facts on mastering our math facts. So I'm going to start with this part, because this is the one that I hear from people all the time. How do we get kids to master their math facts? They can't go on unless they get their math facts known and they have them all down. So what I do with kids is I give every child a grid like this one, a 1 to 10 grid that they work on individually. And this gives them an opportunity to see how well they're progressing. And it gives them an idea that I've mastered these, I can now go on to these. So I'm going to show you how we can master all the numbers on this grid in a very easy, systematic way. So we're going to work first with very basics, counting down and up. So we're doing 1 plus a number. And I'm starting with very simple ideas and working up to a little bit more complex ideas, but they're all going to follow a certain strategy. So this one, using a number line, and you can create number lines for students easily. You can get register tape and write out number lines for them and give them to kids to use. Or they can create one at home, on a desk, on any piece of paper, but just having a number line. And anything simple like just 1 to 30 is easy enough. Now, I'm going to use then clothespins, and you can get clothespins from any dollar store. You can get 30 for $1. And you can cover up a number on that clothespin and then get kids to start thinking about the number. What is that number that's covered up? And you can say 6 plus 1 is going to be what? Or you can say 8 minus 1 is going to be what? So they're going to see how how that algorithm, 6 plus a number, or 6 plus 1 and 8 minus 1, comes up with a number that's hidden under that clothespin. So it's easy to do, just have, and you can have these kids, now we're doing virtual mathematics, you can have these kids working on these type of things at home. So just covering up a number and determining what that number is and using math problems to figure out what it is. 17 plus 1 equals the number that's hidden, or it could be 19 minus 1 is the number that's hidden. So they start to get an idea of where that number falls in the number line, and they start to see how 1 plus a number is going to equal whatever is underneath that, or 1 minus a number. So just that very simple means of getting them to understand the basics of addition and subtraction. So that gets them on that first line of, oops, let me go back. That gets them that first line, 1 plus a number, and that fills in that part of the grid. So they're starting to really get part of their grid learned. And you could do that with 10 plus a number. And once again, very simple. And one of the things that motivates kids a lot is money. So you can do this with play money and start working with 10 plus ones and start to get them to master what 10 plus 1 is, 10 plus 2 is, 10 plus 3 is, by using dollars. And they get the idea that one object can be the value of 10, and then adding the ones onto that. So it gets them an idea of place value as well as monetary things, get them a little bit motivated in understanding the mathematics. So from there, I want kids to start to use their fingers as a tool. So I don't want them necessarily always counting their fingers to get an answer, but I want them to understand the value that these fingers hold. So I want them to start learning that this equals 5, and know that finger count, or the fingers in different cultures are represented different ways. So I'm showing actually the very North American way of doing this, but Asian cultures may show numbers in a different way. So just be aware of that. So this being 4, this being 3, other cultures, this would be 3. So just be aware of when you do this, be consistent with it, and be aware that other cultures represent numbers using their fingers different ways. But you want kids to understand that the value that these fingers hold. So when they see 3, they're always going to know, okay, that see 3 fingers, it's going to be 3. 5 fingers up is 5. So you just want them to understand the value of their fingers. Then I could get that into understanding how to add using those fingers. So if I'm going to have kids use their hands to add, and I say, what is 5 plus 2? And then be able to do this. I want them to say 5 and then close their hand. And so that they're holding that 5 in their memory. This is 5. And then I'm adding 2 more. So I'm going to say 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to be able to add that, the 5 and the 7. I don't want kids to go back and count each one of these fingers. I want them to understand that that value is 5. And that can be a struggle with some kids, but once they close that hand up, they can't count those fingers. So you want them to be able to say 5, close it up, 6, 7. So they're starting to use their fingers to add up. Same with if I'm going to do 5 and 3 fingers, I want them to say 5, close those fingers, and then they can add on those 3 and count up 6, 7, 8. So you start to get that addition using your hands, but not counting each finger, because I don't want them to be just counting up to an answer. I want them to understand the value their hands hold. So doing that, I can then get them to start doing more addition. So I'm going to have them first get the mastery of 10 down. And I want them to understand 2 numbers that make the sum of 10. So when they see a 6, they're thinking 4 automatically. When they see a 7, they're thinking 3 automatically. I wanted that automatic with them. And so we're going to do a lot of activities that make them get that mastery. So I want them to understand with their fingers that this represents 7. I want them to see it on a 10 frame, so they can see that there's 7. They can also see it on 10 frame. But what I want them to also understand is how many fingers do I have down? So if I'm showing 7 fingers up, how many fingers down? And they can see it on a 10 frame because they can see those 3 empty spaces, and they can start to get the mastery of 10. So I could do it with 6. How many? I'm showing 6 fingers. How many fingers do I have down? So you can do this through virtual training. You can work with parents so that they can understand this, so that the kids are always working. And the parents can be just saying, okay, I've got 3 up, how many down? It's gonna be 7 down. I've got 2 up, how many down? 8 down. So it's really working on those strategies that we want the kids to master with the sum of 10. And so we work on that using a 10 frame and our fingers. And so then we get them to this grid where they've mastered their 10s and they have those down flat. And then I can play games with them with regards to this. And this is a game, and I'm going to use a lot of games in which you really has minimal supplies needed, and kids can do it at home with their parents. They can do it, you know, in a class setting, anywhere you want to have them do it. And one of the things with gameplay is it helps them to make connections about mathematics. It helps with quick recall, because as they're playing the game, they're going to start to get faster with it. And games and anything positive. So the things that keep things in memory are those things that are very positive and those things that are negative. So we want them to have a positive experience, and that will get them into long-term memory. And also games build confidence. So I like to play a lot of games with kids. So this first game I'm going to show you is a game called Q, and all it requires is a deck of cards. Now I have a specialty deck of cards that has actually has 0s, 11s, and 12s instead of face cards, but you can use a regular deck of cards. Just remove the 10s, jacks, queens, and kings from it, and you can play the same game. I just happen to have 0s and 10s, so I can include 0s and 10s in this game. So you're going to start with shuffling a deck well, and this can be played with 3 to 4 students. And you have 1 student as the dealer. And it can't be played as just 2 students, because the dealer, being a player, gets to be a little problematic. And I'll show you, you'll see why when you start to see the game. And first off, the dealer is going to put 9 cards face up, and they're going to place them in this 3x3 grid. This is the easiest way for kids to kind of process all these numbers. You don't want to have more than this, because that's a little bit too much to process. But you're going to put up 9 in a 3x3 grid, and you're going to have 2. You can have 2 to 3. And as soon as a player sees 2 cards that make the sum of 10, they're just going to grab them out and pull them to the side. And I like them putting them to the side in the pairs just like this, so that you can still see the pair. Because at the end of the game, it's whoever's the winner has the most pairs. So as soon as they pull those out, there's no turn taking. They just grab them as fast as they can. The dealer is going to replace those cards, and then kids are going to go back to pulling out cards. So as soon as they're empty spaces, the dealer puts cards in, and the kids continue to play. And so this is really going to help with that quick recall that we talked about. And it's a strategy to get them to really continue to work in repetition on these sums. So I'm going to show you, hopefully this video will come through. It didn't for me the other day. So here we go. I'm going to play this little video so you can actually see it in action. This is adults doing it, so they know their facts a little bit faster than kids, so it goes a little bit faster, but they'll kids will get just as fast as these adults are.
Move. You ain't even see it. Just go put your hands on something. Oh my God, look at this. Franklin, look. It's not a match. Because he played too much. You know I'm winning this. He's thinking.
No,
Don't add up.
I got one. There's one there.
There's one there?
Hold on. Wait, two cards. Two cards equal 10.
Oh, she got it. I love it.
That was mine.
I can't see nothing because your hand all in the way. What is it? Zero's what?
What's that?
Oh. What?
Now you want to see? I gotta stand up. Now you want to. You said.
Do the zeros add up to
What the
anything?
zero? 10 and a 0. Nope. Yeah,
Oh, I got
0. Yeah. Literally, yeah.
That's okay.
That's
Cool.
fine.
It's cool.
You
It's
gotta
cool.
take
I
that
got me a
That's
10.
fine. You good?
What is it?
Zero.
Zero. I got that one.
10 plus 0 would be 0.
I'm looking at one right now.
It's another one? Where?
There it is. Yeah, there we go. She got it. He's that quick.
So that one goes very quickly. It's a very fast game. And the kids go through it quickly and they have just as much fun as the adults did. Normally they're not as aggressive as at the beginning as these guys were. They eventually start to get a little more aggressive, but it's a great way to get the kids engaged with it. You could have heard them say that we do have a 0, so I do expect them to get a 0 and a 10 together. But if you have, like I said, a regular deck of cards, you would just take the 10 out and they're just finding the pairs for 1 and 9, 2 and 8, and so forth. One of the greatest things about a deck of cards and why I use it a lot is a deck of cards has 4 of every number. So you get a lot of repetition in a deck of cards that you wouldn't normally get if you're just using like flashcards or just made your own 1 through 10 cards. So you want to use a deck of cards because it's all right there available for you. So,
oh, sorry, we have a couple of questions.
Oh, certainly.
Do you have any suggestions on how to make this game virtual? And also what happens if there's no combinations adding up to 10 in the cards that are showing?
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely. So I haven't figured out how to do this virtually as yet because it is such a such a fast game. You could just make, like I did, just make copies of cards and put it up on a screen and have kids identify them and try to get them out sooner, but that becomes a little bit more difficult. So I haven't really figured out how to do this one virtually. What do you do if there's none? Good question, because I just have that on this slide right now. So if I have no out of this 9 that make the sum of 10, I'm just going to add 3 more and then we can pull those out. But I want to get back to that original 9 because, as I said before, 9 really is about the most that they can process at one time. If I get more cards out there, that just becomes really chaotic in their minds. And even though I have, like here on my little board, I have a lot of cards really close to this, you wouldn't want any cards close to it. You just want those 9 to be available and make their piles off to the side. What's great about this game is it's self-correcting. So if you get down to the last 2 or 3 cards and you find out none of them are matching, it means somebody grabbed the wrong cards somewhere along the line. So that's when you go back and you count your matches and see if you got them all correct. So it's a self-correcting game. And then whoever has the most pairs then becomes the dealer. So you're getting those kids that need the practice to get a little more practice doing it. And so one of the things in this, what happens with kids is that when they get into larger numbers and they have to add them up, they start to make their sums of 10 so that they can do the adding more quickly. So that's what we're helping kids develop, is that idea of how to create the sum of 10 so that when you're adding, you can do it more quickly. And so that's kind of one of the processes on developing better mathematical skills. So once we've mastered the 10s, we then go into 10 plus 1. So I start the strategy on 10 plus 1. So if I'm thinking, if I see a 5 and a 5, I know that's 10. If I'm going to see a 5 and a 6, I know that's 1 more, so it's going to be 11. If I'm thinking in my head 4 plus 6 equals 10. If I see a 4 plus a 7, I know that's one more than the 6, so it's an 11. So it's a strategy to use with kids who need a strategy. This plus or minus 1. So we're going to start with the plus 1 first, because it's always easier mentally for kids to think one more than it is for them to think one less. And that's because as a society, we always count in consecutive increasing orders, far, far more than we talk about numbers in decreasing orders. So just know that it's easier to think one more for the kids and work on 11s before you work on 9s. And so we can have kids start thinking about using the cards, thinking about those pairs that make 10s, and then having them think, okay, 4 is one more than 3, so now I have 11. 5 plus 6 would be 11. 9 plus 2 would be 11, and 3 plus 8 is 11. So they start to see that connection. And then 1 plus, or 10 plus 1 would make 11. So then you can play that same game again, but you're making 11s. So and I wouldn't get to 11s until they really have mastered the 10s, that they're really fluid with the 10s, and then we can go to the 11s. And then they can start grabbing those cards and taking them off to the side. And then, as I said, you can go to 9s and start thinking about one less and having them master then the sums that make 9. And so then we get this grid that we had that was bare before starting to really fill up. And they're starting to have mastery of facts and having strategies on how to get to those math facts. And then we get to our next one is mastery of 9 plus a number. So that will fill in this part of the grid. And what I want kids to think about is 9 really wants to be 10. And I talk to kids all the time. 9 wants to be 10. And so if I see 9 plus a 4, and we could do it visually with counters and stuff. They see 9 plus 4, and then you say 9 wants to be 10. So he's always going to take one from the other pile. So he's going to take one from the other side so that he can be a 10. So we talk about that, use manipulatives a lot, so that they can start to see 9 wants to be 10. So he's going to take one from the other pile. And so then he's now going to be 10, and that other pile is going to be one less. So that's 13. So 9 wants to be 10. You can do it with the cards again. If kids have cards at home, they can do this with their parents or other siblings. And you start putting up a card plus 2. And then you have to think to yourself, 9 wants to be 10. So he's going to take 1. So that's going to be 11. 9 plus 8, 9 wants to be 10, so he's going to take 1, so that becomes 17. 9 wants to be 10, so he's going to take 1, so he's going to become 14. So it's that whole, oops, let me go back again. That whole idea of creating a strategy so they can start to master those facts. So just that idea, 9 wants to be 10. And then we get into doubles with kids, and I'm going through this really quickly for you, but I'm expecting you to spend a good week, 2 weeks, however long it takes for kids to get these mastered so that they can progress through. So then we get into doubles, and doubles is something that is often started early with kids. Once again, you can use fingers with kids and talk about what's 4 plus 4 and start to get them to understand that that's 8, 5 plus 5 is 10, 3 plus 3 is 6, and using the fingers to start to understand doubles. And then you can once again use cards and just tell them to start doubling that card. 6 plus 6 is 12. 2 plus 2 is 4. 5 plus 5 is 10. And get them to start mastering their doubles. And what's nice is this then translates into mastering their multiplication facts as well. So getting them to master their doubles and getting them to memorize those like they memorize their 10 facts. And then from there, we can go to the same strategies we used with our card game. We could use with this one. But here since I don't have a card game for this one other than just going double the cards, is I created this board game in which at the very end of the slideshow presentation will be a URL where you can go and download these games. This is just a very simple board game in which kids are rolling dice, they're then going to double that number and cover that number up on the board, and then they're just going to make their way around the board. So it's a very simple board game, but it gets them working on those doubles and just practicing those doubles. And so the other player would roll the dice and they would move their counter, and it's just whoever gets to the finish line first. So then we've mastered our doubles, and then from there, we do our doubles +1 or a doubles -1, which is the same idea we had with the tens. We're using that same exact strategy. So the kids memorize the strategy so that they can memorize the facts. And so, like I said, in making that path through the brain, we want to really develop a pathway, and using that same strategy again and again helps them really get a firm pathway through that, making those connections in their brain. So we have 4 plus 4 equals 8. So then if you see 4 plus 5, that's just one more, that's going to be 9. If they see 4, they think 4 plus 4 is 8, and they see 4 plus 3, they're going to know that's one less, so it's 7. So they start to get that idea, and so then they get these other parts of their chart filled in. So we're really starting to see progress on mastering their math facts. And I created another little game that they can play, in which, once again, they can use a cards or a dice, and they can either draw a card or roll a dice, but what they're going to do is they're going to think double +1. So that's 8 plus 8 is 16, but 8 plus 1 more is going to be 17. And they can write, they can write that down the board and fill in their space on the board. So they start to get practice and repetitive practice on that plus or minus strategy that we used with the tens. And they can do it on a board game. And what they're trying to do is just fill up all the spaces on their board. And once again, that one's also attached to the URL that you get at the end. So then, if you can see on here, you are just left with these math facts that they have yet to master. And if you can see, the ones in the red are actually the same math facts. The ones in the pink are actually the same in both columns, because a 2 plus a 4 is the same as 4 plus a 2. So they are the same on here. So actually what we have is just 8 math facts that they need to master. And I do that with what I call in-betweeners. So if you see 3 plus 5, and you show them 3 plus 5 using manipulatives, one has 3 sticks and the other has 5 sticks, I can take 1 from the 5 and add it to the 3. And now I have 4 plus 4, which is, I know because I mastered my doubles, is 8. I could do the same thing with 7 plus 5. I'm going to take 1 stick from my 7 pile, give it to my 5 pile, and I actually now have 6 plus 6. But you might also notice that 3 plus 5, there's a number in between this. The in-betweeners is actually 4. 7 plus 5, the in-betweener in here is 6. And I'm just doubling that 6 to get the answer. So 7 plus 5 is 12, which is that 6 doubled. Same with 6 plus 8. I can think in my head, what's the number between 6 and 8 is 7. I double that, that's 14. So 6 plus 8 is 14. Because I'm just taking 1 stick from the other side. So they can see it visually with the sticks, and then they can start to get it with thinking about the in-betweeners. What number comes in between? And the same can be done as 2 plus 4. What number comes between 2 and 4 is 3. And so that I'm doubling. Oops, let me go back a slide. So I would just double that. So then you start to see that I've now started mastering more facts again. I'm starting to get a strategy to master those. And then I can just do that number line that we created earlier, and using that and just covering up, having them look at what's 5 plus 7 is the number in between, which is 12. So 5 plus 7 is 12. What is 9 plus 11? The number in between that is 10. And so the answer is 20. So they can use this number line to help master those math facts that come in between. And it's also a strategy for far more math facts, but it just happens with those last few that we didn't have mastered. And so 9 plus 11 doubles 10. So then all we're left with to master is 2 plus 5, 2 plus 6, which we can just count on. You can think 5 in your head, add, then count 2 more. So if we're working 5, I'm going to add 2 more. If I'm thinking 6, I'm adding 2 more and I get 8. So we can just count on with those. And 8 plus 4 and 8 plus 5, we can use the strategies of thinking about how we make 10 and then what's left over in the number. So if I take 8 plus 4 and I know 8 plus 2 is 10, it's just 2 more. So I've got 12. If I think 8 plus 2 is 10 and this 5 is 3 more than that, so I've got 13. So it starts to give them a strategy, that same strategy we're using every single time. We used it with the mastering of the 10s, 9s, and 11s, mastering of the doubles with plus or minus, and now with this one. So we're using the same strategy to get them to master their math facts. So then we can play this game. And once again, virtually, I'm not exactly sure how to do this virtually, unless you have kids not being able to see each other virtually until the teacher allows them to show their image. So if you have them turn off their cameras and then turn on their cameras, you might be able to do it that way. I'm not sure. But they can do this at home with their siblings. They can do it with their parents. However, they can practice this at home as long as they have a deck of cards. So this game is called Salute. And what you're going to do is a dealer will deal 2 cards face down. And so the players can't see them. The dealer will say the word salute, and the players will take those cards without looking at them and place them on their foreheads. Then the dealer will add up those 2 cards and say what the sum is, which is 8. And so then the player has to figure out what the card is on their head. So as the dealer says 8, this young man can only see what's on the girl's forehead. He only sees the 2. The girl can only see the 6. So then they've got to figure out what's on their head. So then they can call it out, and whoever calls it out first then gets the cards. And then whoever has the most cards at the end wins. So that's a very simple, simplistic game. It goes rather quick. Once again, a deck of cards has 52 cards in it, so you get a lot of practice with doing this, and the kids actually really like it. You will find when the kids first play this, almost always they just shove the card on the other person's head. They see the 4, they're going to say the 4 out loud. So it takes a little practice for them to keep the 4 in their head and to figure out the mathematics and to figure out what's on their head. So on this one, it's a 7 and a 4. As a dealer, I would say you have 11, and then they have to figure out what's on their head, and whoever says it first then wins those cards. And sometimes they haven't figured it out. I often tell kids, just stop and continue to think and see if you can solve this. But sometimes they just, after the person's already said the number, they stop thinking. So just be aware that we try to encourage kids to continue to figure out what cards on their head, but oftentimes they just stop thinking and then they just go on to the next set of cards. And so then the dealer goes through the whole deck. Once they're done with that, the person with the most amount of pairs wins, and then they get to become dealers. So you're always working with those kids that need that reinforcement of it. If I find some kids are really good at it, I will stick them together versus those kids that are still a little slower on the responses. So what they're actually doing in that whole game is they're actually doing subtraction. So although I was the dealer in that game and I'm adding the numbers together, what the students are actually doing is subtraction, and they're working on their subtraction facts. So they can think of an addition strategy to come up with the subtraction answer, which is great. And that's what we want them to do. But just know that if you're playing this game with kids, never tell them it's a subtraction game, because they won't play it. So always encourage them that we're going to play a fun addition game. We're going to play Salute. It's an addition game. Let's have a lot of fun with it. But know that as the kids are playing, those that are the players are always doing subtraction. So it's a great way to get them to practice. Another way I said earlier, is I use money to help kids get motivated on learning about numbers, and place value is a great way to use money, because you have $10 bills and 10 cents that automatically represents the tens place, and you have $1 bills and pennies that automatically represent ones place. So you have an automatic place value system within our currency, which is great to get kids to understand that. So if you're doing like tens, and I have 13 tens, what's the value of 13 tens is actually $130. So they get the idea that a number of tens can also go into a hundreds place. You know, you have 100, because 10 of them will make 100, and then you have 30 tens, and then you have 0 ones. But saying to kids what is 13 tens is sometimes a struggle for kids to understand that place value of it, but using currency or play money, or, you know, helps them develop that concept. And the same can be used with subtraction, with regrouping. If I use dimes and pennies to teach subtraction, with the idea of regrouping, is I can have dice, I can subtract out 10 cents easily, because that's 1 dime. And so they can subtract that out, and they can just play a game with dice and continually subtract out coins. So in this case, I rolled a 7, and so I can subtract out 7 pennies. But the next time I roll the dice, let's say I rolled an 8. I don't have 8 pennies. I don't have 8 ones to take out. So I'm going to have to take out a dime, and I'm going to have to replace that dime with 10 pennies, and then I can take out the 8. So it gets kids to understand that whole concept of regrouping, which you do that algorithm that we all learned, which is, you know, you cross out the 8, you make it a 7, then you add in the 10 to the ones place, that you have 12, and you subtract it from there, and you get 74. So using the coins and currency really helps to foster that idea of what regrouping is with kids, and gives them a reason to understand why they need to learn this, because money is a motivator. So they start to see, oh yeah, I need to understand how to exchange money in order to get the same value, or that, you know, that value taken out. So as I hear often with people all the time, is kids don't know how to count money anymore. They don't know how to subtract money. This gets them practicing with that. And also getting that concept of subtraction with regrouping down. So that is it. That is everything I have. I'm just going to say you can follow Mango Math on social media. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm going to give you the URL where you can get those games if you want to write that down. And I think they're also going to include this on the email that will go out on that. So you can write this URL down to get those subtraction games that were included. And if you got that, you can also contact me at mary@mangomath.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions, provide you with anything. We're starting to do Mango Math, which I work for, is trying to create these platforms and create these things in a more virtual aspect, and we're working on that. So we will hopefully by September, at least by October, we'll have a lot of these games virtually. And so if you have any questions, you can contact me, Mary@MangoMath, or you can call our phone number. So any questions? I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
If anyone has any questions, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can post a question in the chat. Looks like there aren't any questions, but okay. I think everyone just loved all those game ideas. There was a lot of conversation in the chat during the the presentation about how so many of these games are going to be perfect for an after-school space, and I agree. They all seem like really great games that are easy to use and have easy setup. So thank you so much for.
Oh, you're welcome. I just, you know, getting kids to practice their facts through games is the best way to do it. And I think there's a lot of strategies that they can use. So I'm hopefully that you all got something out of it and you can relay this to kids and working with kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for joining us. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the link that Mary just shared, as well as these slides will be coming to you in the follow-up email. And you can join us next week for an SEL related Work It Wednesday. You can see all of our upcoming Work It Wednesdays and register at the link that I just posted in the chat. And if you need a certificate of attendance, there's also a link in the follow-up email for that, or you can click the link that I just posted and follow us on social media. We have a lot of great topics coming up this summer. So if you want to check out our listing there and see what we've got, Mary is doing 2 more. She's doing one on multiplication and division and one on problem solving. Those are both in August. So hopefully we'll see you all then. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Great. Thank you.